I'm Nicholas, welcome to Redline Ranch, and this is my 1997 Toyota 4Runner. It's got a 3RZ FE 4-cylinder, a 5-speed transmission. It's got some engine issues. I got it for a smoking deal, and today we're gonna get it back on the road. It is another beautiful day. We're out here in the scorching New Mexico desert heat, and I just bought myself another project. Got the front diff cylinder head and CV axles in the back. Not always a great sign. Decent interior. We've got a 5-speed 4-wheel drive manual transmission. All right, let's get this thing loaded. Load it on up. All right, look at this thing. It's a sweet looking little rig. No major body damage. The engine is unfortunately in pieces, but that's okay. I've got spare parts, I've got spare engines. New headlights, interior is decent. He said he just did a front lift on it. He said he just did reseal the T-case, did a new clutch in it. So this thing should be good to go. I'm pumped. I'm gonna get this thing strapped on, get it ready to go. Just like that, got it all strapped down. I am gonna hit the road. All right, now that we've got this thing pushed into the garage, we're gonna dive further into it. But first, let's get this hood off. And just like that, hood's off, got a better look at things. It was not super well taken care of. There's a bunch of sand in here. It was obviously kind of sort of covered. There was this towel over it, which looks like it was doing something, but it was not covering all this sand from going in there. I'm gonna go ahead and, since this engine would have to come out regardless, if I was just fixing this engine, I would still pull the engine out because I got to pull the timing cover off, the oil pan off, do a bunch of other things, and I need to clean all of this up super well. Since that's happening anyway, I've got a good to go engine that I'm just going to go ahead and put in this thing so I can get this back on the road and rebuild this engine, have it on my shelf like I did my good to go engine. Went ahead and got the grill pulled so I can get this radiator out of here. The bolts are behind the grill. Got the airbox out, I got the battery out, we've got the rags off of it. We're getting this thing stripped down. I need to get this engine bare bones so I can get it out of here. Once it's pulled, it'll be ready for a new engine, and hopefully by the end of the afternoon, I can have a new engine in here and this thing running. I got the wiring harness draped over the side. I've got everything that was unnecessary out of this bay set to the side. I've got some fuel lines, some coolant hoses, bell housing bolts, motor mounts, and this thing should be ready to pull out. So I'm gonna quit talking, I'm gonna get to work, and we're gonna get this thing out of here. So we've got everything ready to pull, everything connected to the engine, disconnected, motor mounts, bell housing bolts, fuel lines, everything's ready to go. And we've got a chain right here on top of the engine ready to pull just from old head bolts. So super pumped, we're gonna get this out, we're gonna get the engine in, and this thing should be back on the road in no time. Engine's out, you guys saw it just came out real smooth. It's nice. They're really small without heads on them. I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna get this clutch pulled off. It is a brand new Toyota clutch. Dude said he replaced it a couple thousand miles before the engine went bad. We got the new engine next to the old engine. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna transfer everything off of this old engine that this new engine doesn't have. So like this AC bracket, the new engine doesn't have that. We're gonna make sure all of the intake brackets and everything like that, all the hoses, everything like that, everything is swapped over so that when we put this back together, there's no issues. There is no front differential in this thing right now. The dude was going to try and do all of this work with the engine in the bay, and he had pulled the differential to get the oil pan off so that he could clean everything out, and he actually got the oil pan off, but I need to put this front differential back in, and now is the best time. You can see there's no engine in the way. It's gonna be real easy. We can throw it in there. We're not gonna have to fight it near as much, and it should just fly right in. I've got the CV axles, the front diff, and the front diff hardware out. When I pulled the front diff out, this bolt is loose, this bolt is missing. This one was tight, but I don't know what was going on, if they were trying to pull it off of this bracket instead of just this mount, I don't know. But I have a part rig, so I went ahead and I went out there. I could not find the bolt in the car. Pulled one off of a different car, good to go. So I'm gonna get that tightened up. I'm gonna do a nut and bolt check on this whole thing and make sure everything's tight. It was empty, so I went ahead and I pulled the drain and the fill, and I brake cleaned. There was some dust and stuff in it. I just tried to get all of it out of it. So now I'm gonna put the CV axles in, put the differential in, just trying to stab the CV axles while I put it in. We got the front differential in, we got all the mount points in. It is not full of fluid yet. I do not have enough fluid to fill it. So I went ahead and I started working on this oil pan. Like I said, I had already pulled it off once because I wanted to inspect everything down here. Everything looks really good, really clean. I went ahead and cleaned up all of the surfaces on the block, front main cover, front cover, rear main cover, and I cleaned up the oil pan. So I'm gonna get some Guard TV, throw this oil pan back on, and I should be able to throw it back in the bay after that. We got the new engine here. We've got it hooked up to a strap. We're about to drop it in. As you saw, we got the engine in. It is on the motor mounts. I have not put bell housing bolts in. I haven't done anything. I haven't hooked anything up, but super stoked to see that. We got an engine in the bay. That's a good start. We need to get the exhaust manifold on. We need to get this fuel system onto this engine. Got to get the wiring harness on, all the coolant hoses and coolant lines hooked up, radiator back in, all of the accessories. Pretty much all we have right now is motor mount bolts, and they're not even tight. So I'm gonna start by getting motor mount bolts tight, bell housing bolts tight, make sure everything's together, then I'll start putting all the accessories on. The exhaust on, we've got the wiring harness pretty well where it needs to be. We got bell housing bolt, starter, fuel system, motor mounts. So I am actually gonna move on to these accessories. I'm gonna get the alternator on, the power steering pump, the AC compressor, everything on the front of this. Then I can throw this intake on, get all of the wiring wrapped up, and this should be pretty well wrapped up after that. Big progress, big progress. We've got the rest of the intake on, we've got all of the accessories and the belts on, they're all tight. I went ahead and got everything underneath wrapped up. All I've got left is the rest of the intake, a couple lines, these accelerator pedal hooked up to cruise control and everything, and the radiator and coolant. We got an engine bay, we got the intake on, we've got as far on the intake as we can anyway. The previous owner didn't give me this piece. I don't know if they just misplaced it, they didn't have it. I shot them a message to see if they had it. Who knows? They also missing some drive shaft bolts and a couple other odds and ends, but that's okay. We got it taken care of. I'm gonna go pull this off of a spare vehicle I've got, then I can get this thing full of coolant, full of oil, and we can test start it. I'm super excited. Hopefully this engine sounds good. I have never actually personally heard this engine run, so we're just gonna go for it. We're gonna fill it with coolant, we're gonna fill it with oil, and we're gonna start it here in just a sec. All right, I got the parts I needed off of my spare vehicle. I went ahead and filled it with oil, filled it with coolant, and we're gonna throw a battery in this thing, crank it over, and see if it starts. See how it sounds, and make sure this thing is good to go. No oil light. It looks good. Let's see if there's any puddles under it. Cool, no new puddles. There's a little bit of puddles there. Now that this thing is running, I went ahead and I checked the oil. I added just a little bit because it was low. I went ahead and I checked the coolant. It's still doing good. I'm gonna put the hood back on. Everything looks good. I'm gonna put the hood back on. I'm gonna back it out, and we're gonna take this thing for a test drive. Almost forgot about the grill too. And we're back to a car. Let's see if she moves under her own power. Look at that. We're gonna let her just sit here right outside the garage warming up for just a sec. Let's get the heater blowing, get the coolant circulating, let it idle, let it get up to temp, make sure it's not spewing any fluids or anything like that. And after that, we'll take it for a test drive and see how it drives. We got about 10 feet out of the garage when we realized we had an issue. Unfortunately, the power steering doesn't want to power steering right now. I did already jack the front up and try and bleed the system. I turned the engine off and tried to bleed it, turning all the way back and forth, bleed the rack and pinion. That didn't work. So I have a spare power steering pump. I guess I'm gonna throw on this thing because I'd like to have power steering, but that's unfortunate. All right, so I got this new pump on. I went ahead and I filled it with automatic transmission fluid because that's what it calls for. And we're gonna go ahead and bleed the system. Easy fix, stoked, awesome. All right, so we're on our test drive and this thing actually drives pretty darn good. I'm pretty stoked about everything so far, other than the fact that it looks like the speedometer's not working. Not stoked about that. It's an electric speedometer, so it's either an issue with the wiring or it's not plugged in all the way. It should be plugged in. But when I get back from this little test drive, I'm gonna see for sure. Other than that, this thing feels really good. It's pretty peppy. I don't know how fast I'm going. The steering feels a little like it might need an alignment. It doesn't like to self-center, so I might give it an alignment, at least a tape measure alignment. And we're cruising about 55. I got my phone out for a speedometer, and we're doing great. It's got no issues, but we're about to hop onto the freeway. We're gonna see how this thing does pulling up a pretty good grade. It's definitely not the fastest vehicle in the world, but we're getting up to speed, and the speed limit is 65. We're already doing good. We made it up the hill with traffic. We made it up the hill doing 70, 75 the whole time. I think this thing should do decent. I also wouldn't mind putting some lighter tires on it. This thing's got really heavy wheels and tires, steel wheels and really heavy tires. So I wouldn't mind going to some nice aluminum wheels with some lighter highway tires, and that would make a huge difference too. And you already know, first test to all my vehicles. Is it gonna do a burnout? No. Kinda. That was hard on everything. So we're not gonna do that again. Oh, I'm in four-wheel drive. No wonder that was so violent. Holy shit. It does burnouts. I'm getting out of here.